once we have our new audience. So, it appears that technology at work's having a thumbs up. So let me re-welcome everybody to the workforce engagement support event, the workforce engagement event. As I explained to the audience in the auditorium, this is the first time we're trying the webinar, and I would particularly like to welcome those that are joining us via the webinar. As I think everybody probably appreciates, and I'm just going to repeat myself here in terms of the audience in the auditorium, this webinar could be a means of engaging, particularly with people offshore, who of course can't necessarily be with us in the auditorium at the same time as all of us are in the auditorium. And if we could use that webinar to engage with the broader workforce, I think that would be of huge benefit. So for those in the auditorium, and certainly those that are listening to us on the webinar, I would ask you to contemplate this morning, think about how the webinar might be a means of engaging broadly, and encourage your colleagues who can't necessarily be with us this morning to, for the next event, assuming that this is successful and that we're running the webinar again, that they log on, that they use the webinar facility in order to participate in this workforce engagement event. Some of you may be wondering why it's Ian Sharp, that's myself, standing at the front here, as opposed to Les Linklater. You may be anticipating seeing Les, and you're disappointed that it's not Les. Very sadly, Les cannot be with us this morning. He's had a family bereavement, so very rightly, he is spending time with his family. And our thoughts go out to Les, and in particular his wife and his wider family, given that he cannot be with us today. And so to this morning, and let's get the context and an introduction to this. There are two key agenda items this morning. The first is a leaders' debate, and most importantly, that debate is going to be more valuable if the question and answer session after the presentations is a good engagement. And I'm going to therefore encourage you throughout the three presentations. We won't be taking questions during the presentations, but as the three eminent speakers go through their presentations, please think about the questions that you'd like to pose to them. And you can write the question down on the sheet of paper. That's, I see many of you are grasping tightly in your hand. We will have a roving mic. And for those that are on the webinar, I'm reliably assured that if you're looking at your webinar screen, there is a control panel. It's on top right-hand corner, I understand, and there are various drop-down menus in that webinar session, in that control panel, excuse me, one of which is questions. And if you click on that, I'm assured that you will then get a text box, free text space, and you can type your answers in, hit enter or submit, and the Jameson, who's from Step Change at the back, will be collating those questions. So we've got lots of opportunity to get these questions in, and I would encourage you to do that, and we'll get our speakers challenged in terms of the quality of the questions, which I'm sure you're going to submit. The second half of the morning will be aimed very particularly at elected safety representatives to review and to give you, as safety representatives, and indeed anybody in the auditorium, a thorough understanding of how workforce engagement is being threaded through all of the work groups. You know that Step Change has established work groups. You may not have an appreciation of just how much workforce engagement is now core to every work group, and how we want to make sure that workforce is actively engaged in those work groups. And I think it's therefore important that people understand how the work groups are looking for that workforce engagement, and how you as individuals, whether you be safety representatives, particularly safety representatives offshore, but it could be at onshore work sites, or indeed those working on the beach. It's important you know how you can engage with those work groups. The quality of the product from the work group is only as good as the people and the input. We have some excellent people contributing to those work groups, but I know from my own experience working in the workforce engagement work group that it is infinitely better when you actually have the whole spectrum of our industry involved, and that involves everybody from head office all the way out to the work site. You'll also have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the work that's being done within step change to directly support elected safety representatives. I think we all probably understand and appreciate that the elected safety representatives make a huge contribution already to the core subject, which of course making sure that people are safe when they go to work, when they're at work, and when they return from work. But we can do a better job of that. And the work that's being done in the workforce engagement work group is identifying improvements that we think we can make, collectively think we can make, to the understanding of the role of the safety representative, and how to engage with the constituencies, how to support the offshore constituencies, how to work with management offshore. So that's what you can anticipate over the next four hours or so. Leaders debate, questions and answers. Guess what? Plug, please get your questions prepared. And then there'll be the second half of the morning after a coffee session to look at workforce engagement in step change and the role of the elected safety representative. So now let me turn to the leaders debate. And I think I can genuinely say this is a leaders debate, given the three speakers who are on your panel this morning. If there's one thing that I think differentiates, and this is acknowledged as a differentiator, differentiating step change from other trade associations. And this isn't just an acknowledgement in the UK, this is acknowledged across the world when, whether it be people from Australia, Europe, Norway, States, look at what step change does, how it operates and how it engages. The one thing that differentiates step change is that it is a genuinely tripartite organization. It doesn't matter whether it's in this auditorium or at our step change leadership team meetings, because at all of our meetings we have representatives from the employers, be they major operators such as BP or major contractors, and it's very appropriate for me at this point to acknowledge the sponsorship of Billfinger for this session this morning. So whether it's a Billfinger or any of the other major contractors, Step Change leadership team has a very active contribution from those employers. It is equally true to say that there is a very real contribution from the employees on the leadership team, and again in an auditorium like this, where we have safety representatives or safety professionals, or indeed line management. And the more line management we can get in these conversations, of course, not just safety representatives, the better. So that's two of the three of the tripartite. The third member is, of course, the regulator. And to actually have the regulator not just challenging us on the leadership team, but actually part of the leadership team, where they take their own responsibilities back into their own organizations as a member of Step Change, is one of those things that just differentiates Step Change from other organizations that we all know. And here's the context for the debate and the question and answer session that follows. I don't think, and even in the brief conversation I had over tea before we came in, whoever I was talking to, I don't think there's anybody in this room that can have any lack of understanding, if you will, as to the extraordinary challenges that we are faced with in the North Sea today, in the North Sea Basin today. Of course, the oil price, and this is fit for $50, that's the headline on the top of the slide, is the implication there is that this is a low oil price crisis. I don't use the word crisis lightly, but crisis is a word that is used frequently. Even the government has used crisis. And it appears to be, here we go again, another low oil price crisis. Personally, I don't believe this is a low oil price crisis. I think the low oil price has hugely exacerbated the extent of the crisis. But the reality is, and if you look back over the last 4 or 5 years, with the Wood Review, with the publication of the findings from the Wood Review, the establishment of the Oil and Gas Authority, and so on and so forth, this is a long-established issue in the North Sea, made much worse by low oil price. And if there's one thing that we have learned in the North Sea is that we cannot simply ignore safety in these periods of difficulties, but the real challenge is turning that debate into something that is just part and parcel of the way that we are going to address this broad issue that we have in the North Sea, an issue which frankly leaves the question in our minds as to whether major companies can actually look to the North Sea and see it as being competitive and worthy of further investment. So if that's the sort of context, I hope the 3 speakers are going to challenge us as to some of the questions that are already listed on this slide. What are the problems? What is it? Why is efficiency? How do we all play our part? Now, as I said, we will not be taking questions during the 3 presentations, so do keep your questions, gather your questions at the end. There will be a 5-minute break at the end of the 3 presentations, and I will be timekeeping, gentlemen, so forgive me if I intervene. But I will be making sure that we finish on time in order to give us a chance to gather the questions. But of course, we'll have roving mics if anybody would like to actually participate. So we said we would get going at about 10 to 9. Let me kick off the debate by introducing our first panelist. And many of you will know, I'm sure, Trevor, who is sitting on the right-hand side of the panelist table there. I'm not going to go through the biography, Trevor's biography. You can all, you've got all the information you would like to have about Trevor in the biography. But I just want to simply highlight 2 things. Firstly, as well as, of course, representing BP, Trevor is also co-chair of Oil and Gas UK. And so whilst he is representing BP in his comments, at the same time, I'm sure, he will be able to also thread through, or he will prompt us to think about the broader context, not just simply a BP, but of course, as a major investor in the North Sea, and I'm sure he will say a future investor in the North Sea, I think he will give us some great context vis-a-vis the basin, the totality of the basin. You'll also see in the notes that I think very sadly for the industry, Trevor is retiring at the end of the year. And I note that the notes say that he's retiring from the industry. Personally, I'm not convinced of that he will retire from the industry, because we can't afford to lose good people. But I do take this opportunity to, on behalf of us all, as I introduce Trevor, to wish him all the best in whatever new ventures you find yourself facing at the beginning of 2016. So, Trevor, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and good morning to those of you on the webinar. And thanks, Ian, for the opportunity to say a few words here, and keep me on time if you would. There's obviously lots I can talk about in this topic. This slide here, staying safe, getting competitive. That's actually a BP phrase that we're using at the minute to try and engender, these two parts, if you like, of our strategy, which is obviously to stay safe. You know lots about that. You spend a lot of time talking about how we do that better. But the other thing that we've got to do, and we can't forget, is that we actually have to compete. Now, this is, as I say, it's a BP slogan, but I think it works for the basin as well. It works for the North Sea. The North Sea has to stay safe, and we know that good safety is good business, but the North Sea also has to be competitive. You have to realize that most companies have a choice about where they invest, and this is one of the most expensive places to invest in the world. So, as much as I like the North Sea, I've spent my whole career in the North Sea, as much as I think there's lots of oil and gas still to come, and there's great things that we could still do in the North Sea, I realize that I'm competing with other basins around the world. I'm competing in BP, with Angola, with Trinidad, with Baku, increasingly with Egypt to get investment here. So, we should all understand that, and most companies are in that position. Very few are just investing in the North Sea. So it's worth us remembering those two things. I was asked to talk about 3 questions, or maybe it was 4. But what's the issue? What's the big challenge we're facing? Why is it important to us, and what are we doing about it? You won't be surprised to see these curves, I don't think, and you've already had them referred to by Ian. The green curve. So there's two issues. There's the price issue and there's the cost issue. The green curve. If you just follow your eye across on the green curve, 3-4 years of very high prices, we got used to it. Did we get complacent? Perhaps, with the price, perhaps. If you go back to June 2014, that top grey stippled line, you can see the projection that people were making in June 2014 of where the oil price would go. They thought it would come down, but not significantly. You roll forward to February 2015, the beginning of this year, people were still thinking that it would increase back to about $80, but obviously by then people had realized we were into a lower for longer scenario. And then more recently than that, just in October, a month ago, the average of everybody's forecasts of the oil price is now lower still, another $10 lower if you like, and I think this week most of you have seen the price. Last week 43, this week 44, 45. So sub $50 from 110, 115 dollars. A huge drop. But as Ian says, actually that huge drop is one part of the story, and you could argue that you could argue rather that we're in a low oil price period at the minute, we're in a high oil price period, and this is sort of where it might be. The economics of how much is being supplied in the world and how much is being used, the demand, says that we're kind of closer to where we should be if you just take those two aspects of it. And then if you look at the red line, the cost line, although it's not exactly true, we've nearly doubled, or we had nearly doubled our cost per barrel in this basin. And I saw some data recently that said globally the average cost per barrel is about 11 or 12. So if you think about staying safe and getting competitive, we're a long way from that in this basin. And we managed again during that period of high oil prices to let costs come up. There were some good things that were done there. There was a huge investment actually in integrity during that period, and step change was a part of that, improving hydrocarbon releases and lowering those significantly. And some of that was because of the extra investment put in. But we did some other things I think that we now need to pull back from. Those are the two big challenges. What are we doing about it? Well, as I say, as we decide what we are doing, we have to bear in mind, we have to keep at the forefront of our whole strategy, staying safe and running a safe operation. For obvious reasons that you all spend a lot of your time trying to make sure happens. We don't want anybody to be hurt. But actually beyond that, as you well know, there are real business reasons for staying safe, staying reliable, and staying kind of online with no releases. So we want that. We want to do that and continue that as the main objective. But number 2, we want to lower those unit production costs. We can do that by in a let's say a fairly blunt method by trying to negotiate lower prices. We can do that in a bluntish method by delaying work or by laying off people. But a cleverer method is to get more efficient. And that's what we are really going to have to work on to ensure that we can sustain this basin. Because some quick cuts and quick delays and stopping drilling, they all do help you in the short term, but actually they are very short-term interventions, and they don't help you in the long term. So activity phasing is something you can do. The one I'm very keen on, and may be true to your hearts as well, is when you look at what we call wrench time, the amount of actual hours that are achieved offshore at site, or even sometimes in the office in a working day, it's pretty low. It's getting better on some installations. It's pretty low though overall. I don't think any of us should be proud of our efficiencies. And that's not to say this is the problem of the workforce. This is a problem of planning. This is a problem of management. And it's something that we should really try and tackle. It's a big lever at improving our competitiveness. Simple cartoons are always dangerous because they are simple. But just to look at what happens at $100. A couple of years ago, $100. If you take the $100 barrel and you take the fully built up costs in the yellow of running a platform, and by the way, there's a huge range here from probably about $15 a barrel up to $70 or $80 a barrel, that yellow bar could be. Then you take some money, you take another cut of that barrel, if you like, to reinvest, to drill or to expand or to build new facilities. And you pay some tax, what you're left with is the blue. What you're left with is the blue. So at $100, clearly companies were making profit, they were returning money to their stakeholders. If you take those same costs across to a $50 barrel, you can see if you want to invest even at half the rate, you're probably not paying any tax now because you're not making any profits. But if you want to invest at even half the rate, you've actually got to borrow money. And borrowing money at the minute is actually quite difficult. So what can you do? Well, you lower your cost base. You try and lower your cost base so that you can continue to invest, because this is a basin that requires investment. It requires investment for integrity. It requires investment for new wells, and obviously when you find something, and I believe we will continue to find new oil in this basin, you want to invest to develop it. So can we operate at $50 or $60 a barrel in this basin? Absolutely we can. We've done it before. But do we have to change? Yeah, we do. We have to change a lot of things. But we are not sunk by any means because the price is at 50, as long as we get after efficiency and as long as we get after the cost of doing business here. Now, I've got a few examples here of things that we're doing. Before I go to that, actually, just to say, there are a number of interventions being made. Individuals are making interventions. The government has tried to make an intervention around tax to help, promote some investment. There are Oil and Gas UK have got an efficiency task force, which is trying to help industry do things together. And of course, individual companies are doing many, many things. And as I say, some of them they're doing in a kind of drastic reactive fashion, which is perhaps understandable given the sudden drop in revenue, but actually probably won't be sustainable. And then others are doing some good efficiency programs. And then there are some things going on that are transformational, actually, about the way companies work together. And I think actually a lot of the breakthrough will be in those areas about how suppliers and operators work, maybe how the workforce works with management, and so on, and how actually we work with the regulator. So there are lots of things going on. I've got three very quick examples. I won't let you go through the whole thing here, but one is just some basic things on materials management. Cutting down the number of warehouses that we use, better cataloging of what we use, scrapping what is never going to be used again. And we're finding that there's easy ways to be more efficient here. And I know that many other companies are doing something similar. What Oil and Gas UK are doing is actually starting to share inventories so that we can share sparing and we can speed up the time. If you need something that you haven't got, you can call somebody up and find it. In each of these examples, by the way, you could sit there and say, why weren't we doing that already? And I think it's a great question. But the point is that this crisis is prompting people to think harder and harder. And I think actually everybody can take part in this. That's the point. So the second one on helicopter sharing, this is actually from our business in Norway, where we were routinely only using 13 out of the 19 seats. We've teamed up with Statoil, who've got fields in the same area. Now we have full load and obviously that's a much more efficient way of running things. The third one is on scope. And in fact, although this one's about well work, where we're kind of doubling up the planning on wells so that we don't have to do everything the same, repeat everything on every well, where we're using different valves that's helped us to reduce scope, and where we're helping to optimize planning with some of the weather forecasting, has helped us reduce our costs and reduce our scope of well work in deep water from these light well intervention vessels, which is extremely expensive, I can tell you. So it's a great thing to try and intervene in. Now, scope is scope and planning are one of the areas where we can make the most difference. And again, this doesn't have to come from managers or supervisors. Everybody can see some waste. Everybody can see a way in which they can change things. And I would encourage you to kind of speak up and share your ideas. One of the things we're not changing is our support for apprentices. I'd like to kind of put this in because I think, at these times it's very easy to stop training. We've got 99 guys in a scheme currently on various stages of development. We've got people at SCORE as well and with AMEC Foster Wheeler. I think it's really important that we don't get so short term that we cut training and cut development of our youngsters. We get some great people off these schemes. And the last thing I want to leave you with is this charter, which is pretty high level, but what it says is, if companies perhaps can think about, during these times, working together a little bit better, if we can listen to each other's good ideas as the first one, and take on good ideas, good efficiency ideas, we can help ourselves. If we can provide access to the supply chain to decision makers in oil companies, and actually in the different tiers of the supply chain, that can help kind of grease the wheels. If we can strengthen the cooperation and the standards with which we behave, and particularly simplify with the way in which we behave each other, and if we can continually have this push on being more competitive and improving the way we do things, all of those things can help our business. As I say, I think although there are huge pressures on cost and huge pressures generated by the lower oil prices, I think one of the responses that we've got to come up with is a cultural response, and have an understanding, yes, as you all do, that safety is important, safety is good business, but also understand that this basin, the North Sea, has got to become more competitive. And we can all do something about that, is my message.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Can I just check the back that technology is still working with it? We're good to go. Fine, thanks. My thanks again to Trevor. I almost sensed there was a need for a round of applause, but there will be a collective opportunity to thank everybody at the end of the session. Just before I introduce Bob, who is our next speaker, I think we are sometimes challenged in a safety or an engagement event like this, and I am now very firmly my co-chair hat on, my step change co-chair hat on, not somebody in a business, that we shouldn't talk costs, we shouldn't talk tax, we shouldn't talk wrench time. Oof. I don't agree with those, and I have 3 comments to make as to why I don't believe that it is appropriate to not talk about that. First of all, we are all, to some degree or another, business people, and we need to know the context, because we are faced with some challenging times and decisions that have to be made. And if we don't understand the context, then not only do we not understand why things are being done, much more importantly, we don't know how we can contribute. And unless we are all contributing, then the second comment will plan out. And that is, my second comment is that I think everybody in this room knows that safety is, 1, absolutely integral to business, and 2, good safety is good business, or good business becomes good safety. It doesn't matter which way around it is. But we have to ensure that understanding the context, we can then make sure that safety remains an absolutely visible and integral part of our business. And then thirdly, I say this with a little bit of hesitation, but sometimes, and it was only in May of this year, some people might say it's months ago, but it only feels kind of like yesterday almost, that occasionally I am personally left wondering if we actually get it. Do we really get the magnitude of the challenge that we're faced with? An old boss of mine said, you have to say things 15 times, and others use 18 and 17, whatever. You have to say things repeatedly to just make sure that it lands with people and we get the message. And this is a difficult period for the industry, which we can come out of, but it is nevertheless a difficult time for industry. I hope that Trevor, in his opening comments, have stimulated some thoughts in your mind. Certainly, I managed to capture at least one question, and I hope you too have been able to capture questions, either in terms of Trevor's role within BP, or perhaps more broadly in terms of the broader operating community. Now, as I move on to introduce Bob Egan, who has a wonderful title, Head of Workforce Engagement and Health and Safety Executive. This morning, Bob is representing the Health and Safety Executive. I sometimes wonder if Bob finds himself wondering what the heck he's got himself involved in, as yet again he finds himself speaking in public, which, having known Bob for many years, actually not sure was necessarily something he had in his long-term career plans. However, as a winner of the Oil and Gas UK 2014 Safety Representative of the Year, joining that group of highlighted, singled out safety representatives, I think you should be well able to deal with the limelight. And so with that, and with his health and safety executive hat on, I'll pass over to Bob.
Hello everybody. Firstly, I hope the message gets through to the workforce and their safety reps the importance the HSE are putting on workforce engagement. The HSE are acutely aware of the problems facing the industry. These are very hard times for everybody involved in the oil industry. Everybody with any connection knows that, they see it and live it day to day. But it has to be made clear from the HSE point of view, whether it's now $44 a barrel or $144 a barrel, the price of your life, your workmate's life, the impact an injury or catastrophic event will have on your family, that will not go up and down with the price of oil. So the HSE focus to the industry, that won't be changing. In line with the strategy, the workforce engagement, asset integrity, competence, the management of health and safety, safety critical maintenance and maintenance offshore, essentially the maintaining safe operations agenda will continue. And with the new additions to the HSE, there is an aim to improve that. The HSE will continue to work alongside industry leaders at this time at the step change leadership team and with the safety reps within that. And it's already been mentioned, what sets step change over and above anything else in the world is the direct involvement of the workforce. It's them having that talk, sitting at the top table and getting asked the questions and being invited and to contribute at the events and actively engage with the wider workforce. But we'll continue to meet with safety reps offshore and during offshore and offshore during inspections. We're currently putting into ways improving the HSE and safety rep and workforce engagement, and this will be pre and post inspections. We'll make sure the reps see the agendas. You'll be amazed the amount of reps that don't see the agendas that they're required to see prior to offshore visits. And then again, it's quite startling when you go in meetings offshore and onshore asking the reps how many actually see the outcomes of the HSE inspections. Now, that's a legal requirement. Now, I'm not saying it's up to the reps to go looking for it as well, but the HSE have got to up their game and improve this with the direct engagement of the workforce, because it cannot be seeing the industry improve this, improve that. There's definite improvements with HSE also to be made on this. So we see the engagement and involvement of the entire workforce key to safe productions. I, alongside the HSE, see the rewards the duty holders and employers get when they invest in their safety reps and improves the culture offshore. It's no surprise when safety reps are working well. They become an integral part of the management system, and safety improves, and with that, so does the business. All elected safety reps have a major role to play in this. All need to be aware of this. They need to be suitably trained, focused on the importance of the role, the powers and functions they have. They also need the time and facilities to do this properly. They need to have the right direction and spending time between occupational hazards and the high hazard, low probability events that cause devastation. The industry has a lot of good information and procedures for personnel on occupational injuries, but we also need to concentrate on the low frequency, the high hazard potential incidents. This is vital to continued safe, sustainable production in the UK continental shelf. The whole workforce and supervision need to understand major hazards. It's good to see the new and better inclusion of major accident hazards and MIS, but not everybody will have worked their way through that yet. And also the asset integrity and all the good information coming out from step change on major accident hazards and the alignment of all the groups within step change on major accident hazards. So along with this, the safety reps need to have the opportunity to understand and be trained on major accident hazards. and this needs to be communicated to their constituents for the reps to have the most effect. This is why we have that SI 971 and why SI 971 is still of value today and needed today as much as ever. The reps should be getting engaged with the major hazards, getting involved in every safety case. These are all getting reviewed now with the new Offshore Safety Directive, and good meaningful involvement with the safety case, using the competence, the experience, the knowledge from the coalface. This is why there is a requirement for the workforce to get involved in the safety case. When the industry fails to invest in the safety reps, they miss a great opportunity to improve business overall. And at the moment, it's we quote our 2014-2017 strategy is the PO safety rep training modules. Now, there are potentially around 2,000 reps in the offshore industry, and I quoted these figures back at the end of May at the Safety Summit, but the update figures, and I'll keep quoting them, is there's 531 modules being done, which is an increase of 62 since June. For those who don't know, the courses are understanding major accident hazards, understanding risk analysis in the safety case, incident investigation, root cause analysis, inspections and audits, and how to present the findings. So there's been a total of 204 delegates. 77 of the 204 have completed all modules, which is an increase of 8 since June. If you're doing as good as the industry-approved development training at your workplace, that's great. It's not a problem, but let's see it, share it, and compare it. At this time when we should be sharing, it's great to see what's working well and what's working good on your assets. When it comes to efficiency, safety has to be at the heart of it. People's experience and history tells us that safe working places are more efficient and more productive. Consulting with your employees can have real benefits to every business, increased productivity, improvements in overall efficiency and quality, a higher level of workforce motivation, and a healthier, safer place to work. And the need to maintain the workers' competency, as that is just as important as maintaining any police or plant or kit. I keep forgetting about this. With the offshore inspections I've been on and the feedback I get from the inspectors after their visits, plus meeting many reps onshore, the first things mentioned now is morale, then fear for jobs, cutbacks on maintenance, and the engagement and involvement of the workforce on these issues. The HSE can't regulate morale, but it can advise and highlight that industry should look very hard, and we must pull out all the stops to improve this, as it's not sustainable if people are more focused on the safety of their income or the fear for their future employment than the safety for themselves and their workplace. And this has to be managed and checked. Morale needs attention, with openness and talking through and giving facts and the reasons to the workforce from the top of the organisations, and concerns, if not agreed, at least fed back and acted on. The company's values need put into practice. The contractors, who are by far the largest majority of the workforce, they need exactly the same engagement, and so do their employers. There's a lot of their employers don't see HSE findings, and that's something that should be put right. I now work alongside HSE inspectors. These men and women spend every day scrutinising every part of the industry. Why? Just to make sure all associated with it are safe and meeting the standards and which is put down in health and safety law. The reason SI 971 was set up was to improve safety offshore, to stop catastrophe, to give direct avenues to your workmates and for you to do an active part. I was extremely fortunate to meet Lord Cullen with the help of IOSH and Ian Waldron setting it up, and we did talk a lot about safety reps and SI 971. And when he was doing his report to the Piper Alpha disaster, he talked about the importance of the workforce, their education, their engagement and knowledge in safety. You check points 30 and 31, if you like, from the Cullen inquiry on the protection of safety reps and the training of safety reps. And these same points then appear again in the Maitland report that was done in 2010, 2011. For reps who have taken up the important role, please do the functions. If you want the development training, have tried your workplace channels and getting nowhere, come to the HSE. They have a duty to act on it, and if it's possible to help and act, we will. The need to train safety reps is there for all to benefit, for all in the workplace, but for the reps, feed back to your constituents, your management, let them see the investment they're making on improving safety is worthwhile. There is a need for safety reps to do their functions without fear or obstruction. There is a need for the workforce to know what the reps can do for them and all to understand this role. Safety and efficiency should go hand in hand without question. Efficiency will not happen if people are getting hurt or the chance of catastrophe is increased. We all have a part to play in this, on and offshore in every role. Safety and environmental protection is good for business, and it's just as much good for business as engagement, and safety is good for environmental protection. Thank you. I've missed my last slide.
Thank you, Bob. Excellent time management, so we're pretty much on time. And so I will just very briefly introduce our third and final panelist. A panelist who I suspect needs actually no introduction. Everybody in the room, I imagine, knows Jake Molloy extremely well. I've known Jake almost 10 years now, when I look back. And through this time, I've come to know Jake as somebody who I have a huge amount of respect for. And I have respect for him as he is someone who just really understands our industry. But perhaps more importantly, Jake is someone who cares deeply about the industry, and most particularly the people who are either directly involved or indirectly involved in the industry, in other words, the families. So Jake, over to you.
Thanks for that, Ian, and good morning, everybody. As Ian said, I'm Jake Molloy. I'm an elected workforce representative. Went offshore in 1980, as the programme says, and spent 17 years offshore. The last 6 of which I was an elected representative, elected workforce representative was a different role. I was an elected safety representative. I was then elected in this post, and I'm subject to an election every 5 years. And if things keep going the way they are, that could come a lot sooner than you think. I make the point about being elected as it puts into context and reinforces the representative role. And I'm representing a group of around 5,500 offshore workers. I also make the point, as I'll come back to it, the subject of elected representatives later. And just one more thing before turning to the questions, because I'm going to stick strictly to the script. I'm here to discuss health and safety issues only, not industrial relations issues, unfortunately, although I maintain that the two subjects are inextricably linked, as Bob's alluded to. So, turning to the questions, I'm not going to labour them, because I think Trevor's the first 3 pretty well. So I'll be brief. First question was, what are the industry problems? Well, as I say, I've only got 10 minutes. But from the perspective of the constituency that I represent, the main problems are, and hopefully this will generate a few questions, that we're top heavy, that we've got too many people that rely on voicemail and email to deflect the inefficiencies that actually exist. There's too much burdensome bureaucracy, there's too many priorities, there's too many forms to fill, and there's too many mixed messages around safety rules, which, allegedly, only become rules when something goes wrong. So how do we deal with those problems? Well, that leads me into question 2, which is, why is efficiency important? As I say, my constituents would welcome greater efficiency in the areas that I've mentioned, as they argue it would get the job done quicker, it would get it done cheaper, and more importantly, it would get the job done safer, with a great deal more support and buy-in from the workforce, greater workforce engagement. That would come through simplification, standardisation, equality, transparency, and, as Ian's mentioned, trust. These are all words that are used repeatedly in respect of how we improve. No compromise, absolutely none whatsoever, Trevor. Improving efficiency is what it's all about. The industry's made significant decisions in recent times, where collaboration has been the key to delivering improvements and meeting challenges. And yet, as we face the greatest challenge we've probably ever faced, there doesn't seem, or doesn't appear at least, to be an appetite to make the changes happen which might deliver significant efficiencies in the areas that I've mentioned. This reluctance is seen, or the reluctance to simplified and standardised approach could, it's seen, be considered undermine the industry efforts to improve productivity and efficiency in other areas. My constituents increasingly are becoming disillusioned with the whole safety message, as it's not seen as an area where we can make improvement. So therefore, efficiency is absolutely important, as it can win hearts and minds, and it can be a positive driver in safety terms. However, it must be across the operations and not targeted to one specific aspect of operations. And that leads me to the third question. What is industry doing to adjust to the new oil price? As I said, I'm not going to labour this, or it'll sound like a trade unionist rant, but I'll say this, in fact I'll say it in 2 words. When it comes to safety specifically, not enough. As I say, I don't want to turn this into a rant, but slashing jobs, pay and conditions without addressing the issues which workers believe can improve operational efficiency and productivity, and moreover safety performance, is not, in my book at least, the best way to adjust to a new oil price. But it's the only thing which my constituents are seeing right now. To my mind, that means that we're creating a working environment that might actually be less safe. And I say less safe as opposed to unsafe, for the benefit of the safety professionals that are in the room, because I want to touch on this in closing. And again, this leads me into my last question, or the last question, how we all play a part. I mentioned at the outset being elected to represent, and this is what I'm endeavouring to do here. I'm representing the views of my constituency. It is this representative role which I believe is critical and fundamental to answering the last question, and at the same time supporting the objectives of this group being West and the Workforce Engagement Support Team. So how we all play our part. As workers, you've all got a statutory duty to report anything which poses a risk to you or anybody around you. As a leader, you've got a statutory duty of care to the workers. If you're a worker offshore, you should have an elected safety representative. And if you're a supervisor offshore or a manager onshore, a leader, you will have elected safety representatives to work with. As workers, you should use them. As leaders, you should engage them. An elected safety rep's role is absolutely critical right now. Critical. And I think it's worth taking a glance at how elected safety reps can deliver on this question of how we play our part to the benefit of all, to the benefit of improving efficiency and productivity. They may not be able to influence every problem or address efficiency in every area. They certainly want to be able to influence how the industry adjusts. Therefore, you may not be able to prevent a site becoming less safe in some respects, but you absolutely can influence matters in respect of operations being unsafe. And to do this, you need look no further than the Offshore Installation Safety Reps and Safety Committees regulations of 1989. And I've selected a couple of slides which I'll run through quickly for you. I'm just going to jump straight into Regulation 16, which is the functions of a safety rep. You can go through the regulation itself, but you come to the guidance, and the guidance explains how, as Bob's alluded to, the rep should be informed which suggests to me they should be well trained, which is covered further under Regulation 27, which talks about reasonable training. What's reasonable in the current situation we're in? I think it's reasonable, as Bob's alluded to, that you're aware of major accident hazards to prevent shutdown, to improve efficiency and improve productivity. That's being proactive, not draining costs. The guidance also goes on to talk about how you should raise concerns in writing, and I emphasise that, in writing, and especially around matters that are unsafe or, I'll emphasise, unhealthy. And I think you know where I'm going with that one. And if there's any apprehension about carrying out your functions as a safety rep, you need only skip into Regulation 17, which sets out and explains your powers. And your powers are set out in the regulation. But more than that, it explains that you can seek advice and support from anybody that you choose as a safety rep. Anybody. That's a power you have. And just to be absolutely clear about who you can talk to, the guidance sets it out. It spells it in no uncertain terms who you can contact. You can contact me, or you can contact Wally at your right. You can contact Bob. You can even contact Trevor, because Trevor, he's the most responsible one because he's a duty holder. You don't have to go to your employer. If things are critical, you can go straight to the duty holder. That's who you are an elected safety rep for. So to ensure there are no unsafe conditions, you can use your power to inspect any aspect of the operations. And this should be read in conjunction with Regulation 26, which provides for time off to do this work. And also Regulation 25, which provides for access to all relevant documentation, which might include reports from verification bodies and the testing of safety critical equipment. And just in case there's the odd dinosaur out there of a manager, and we know they all exist, if they're questioning you as to why you're exercising your powers, you can always stick the associated guidance under their noses and explain to them that you've sought the help of your trade union rep. Take it up with him if you've got a problem. This is critical during this period to keep operations productive, to keep them safe, protect the reputations of the operators, and most importantly of all, to keep each and every single one of you safe. And I think there's one other slide which I think I would like to flag up, Regulation 21, because it's underused. I know I speak to safety reps. You can actually broaden out the whole engagement process and understanding by getting a deputy in to attend safety committee meetings when you're not available. So as I said at the start, I'm only here to talk about health and safety. I'm going to wind up on that point, because during these difficult times, making sure that each and every one of you are safe is a priority for me, and I think it should be for all of you. The machinery exists to do that, and I strongly recommend that every single one of you play your part in that. We're all representatives in some way. We all need to step up to the plate during these difficult times. We need to be heard, and you need to make a difference to keep things safe. Thanks for your time. Thanks a lot.
So, there you have the thoughts from the three panelists, and we now move into the time that arguably is of most value, but it's only of value if you do precisely what Jake asked us all to do, which is to get involved. And I'm hoping that we've got some questions coming in from the webinar, and you will have questions. If anybody has a sheet that they wish to just pass over to any of the ladies who are around, please do so. There will be roving mics. Let me just remind you what you've heard. Trevor gave you a whirlwind business context he described as simple graphs, but actually some very, very potent graphs. He described very succinctly the sorts of things that operators find themselves having to do. And I also think we heard a commitment to the future, insofar as Trevor talked about the commitment to apprentices, which is something we are all concerned about as we contemplate the future. Bob reinforced the HSE's role, their commitment to us as individuals, and I mean us as individuals involved in the industry, and our individual health and safety. I did also hear him saying that HSE have a role to do in playing, contributing, and even stepping up their own game. So there's an acknowledgement there that everybody has a role to play and perhaps needs to change. He re-emphasized the need for us to play our part. And Jake, in his inimitable style, just brought us right down to earth with a crunch, where he highlighted that there is a business context, but there is the perception or the reality as to how those changes impact not just people involved in the industry, i.e. us as the workforce, but of course the consequential impacts that has on families. And he labored the point of your individual roles for those of you that are in the audience as safety representatives. And I could not agree more. Now is the time when we need workforce engagement, because without that, I think the reference to dinosaurs that Jake made, which was maybe, I take it a little bit out of context, but if we don't address some of these things, we may find ourselves being described as a dinosaur industry. So, questions. Who's sitting with a burning question that they would like to start with? And just to get the thing going, I'm going to look to see to Jameson. Did you get anything in from the outside that you'd like to start off with? And then I would look to the audience here to see if we can get some questions.
Yes, Ian, we've got one here for Trevor. I might moderate it just a little bit for you. Your address was focused on costs and reducing them, but can you explain to the workforce why it is that the workforce are first to suffer and under attack when the oil price drops? And if I just skip ahead to the key question here, do you not think that it's about time that the OGUK club woke up to the fact that in order to reduce costs, rules and standards need to be implemented and companies need to be accountable to that club?
That's the moderated version. I think I understand what's being said. I mean, the reference, I guess, is to some very visible changes that companies made at the beginning of the year as they saw prices drop. I think I made reference in what I said is that, you know, when you see price drops, generally there's a certain rapid behavior that you know, you see a few things happen quite quickly, like drilling tends to stop because it's one of the easiest investments to turn off. You tend to see agency rates tackled, and agency rates, in my view, should be tackled because they were way out of sync with any other normal wage for the similar disciplines. And then, you know, what also happened, which I think annoyed people most of all, was some very rapid changes to, and Jake referred to it, or indirectly, to terms and conditions, including rotas. Some of those changes, I think, Oil and Gas UK and myself would argue were not done very well. They weren't done with enough consultation. They weren't done with enough warning. They weren't done with due thought to people's holiday plans. And, you know, I think the industry can learn from the way, you know, the way some of those things were done. However, I do think other companies did them better. It is only one intervention, but it's one of the interventions that can save costs and make things more efficient. We can come back to it if you want to. Regarding Oil and Gas UK's role in rules and standards, I mean, I put up at the end there albeit quickly, a charter that the oil companies and suppliers in Oil and Gas UK are being asked to sign up to. And one of the things there is to try and work together more to simplify rules and standards. And I think Jake was alluding to it as well, is that perhaps they could do that quicker. And I must admit, I'm frustrated in how slow some of these things are, but it actually is quite difficult. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to get a bunch of oil companies to agree a standard. However, everyone realizes that there is something in that, and I think individual companies are trying to do things with their suppliers, and obviously what the next step is for them to do it with each other. Rules is one thing, and behaviors. I mean, the other thing is standardization of equipment. There's John Pearson at AMEC Foster Wheeler is leading a charge to try and get more equipment standardized in the industry. We're very good, and we have some really smart people inventing different things for pretty much the same application. And I think there's a huge prize in us standardizing, well-designed compressor design, valve design, and so on. But that's another topic in itself.
Thanks, Trevor. We're not going to see from the body language, unfortunately, if the person who submitted that question has a follow-up question, but if the individual who submitted the question does have a follow-up question, then you know how to do it. The question was aimed at Oil and Gas UK, on Trevor. Actually, I would also like to respond on behalf of step change and accountability and stepping up to the plate. Maybe Jake will contribute to this conversation in terms of step change, because one of the things, there was a question, the question, how do we hold people to account? On the step change leadership team, we spent a day at a planning day off-site. Actually, I wasn't in this room, it was one of the rooms in this building. One of the things that we specifically talked about was empowerment, accountability and empowerment, because a key agenda for step change is the simplification and standardization agenda, where we feel very strongly that we must address some of the very issues that Jake, Trevor have already done, Bob, for that matter, have alluded to in terms of simplifying those procedures which we probably recognize don't actually contribute to safety. And the question that I have is, can everybody come to the step change leadership team meeting with the empowerment to sign up to that simplification and standardization? We've identified a number of procedures or processes, call them what you will, which we think can be standardized across the North Sea. So that if you go to, whether it be West of Shetland, whether it be Magnus, whether you go to Dunland, whether you go to any installation you care to think of, that you're actually presented with a North Sea standard procedure. And if we could do that and make sure that people are held accountable to, if they are part of the institute, to signing up to that standardization and simplification agenda, I think we could change. We'll start with relatively simple things, but that enables the really difficult things to be challenged, possibly even getting into permit to works, for example, and I'm talking about safety. But accountability and step change, Jake, and the question that was posed at Trevor, any thoughts from you, Jake, on that?
I'll be here all day. I hear what Trevor's saying about, I've heard it all too often, that it's difficult to get a bunch of oil companies to agree on anything. But when they're compelled to, for good business, we've seen it with EBS, we've seen it with helicopter seating, we've seen it with shape and size, we've seen it with windows, we've seen it with even grounded helicopters collectively overnight. It can be done. There just needs to be a will. In fact, you alluded to the fact that some oil companies put everybody through in a matter of days without even any consultation. So it can be done. They can do it. I think, and that's why I emphasise the safety rep stuff, we need to challenge the oil companies. But I'm going to turn it around a wee bit, try and a wee bit of engagement. How many people use safety observation systems, stop cards and focus cards? And keep your hands up if you think they're good. Okay. How many would you like to see a standard one across the North Sea? There you go. So we don't need Oil and Gas UK member companies to do what they're told. That's the mandate for them to do what they're told. This is something that's been getting banged on about for years. We really need to move it on if we're going to maintain the culture, maintain that positive attitude. If we don't, I suspect some of these guys want to be back at the next meeting. That's what worries me.
So don't miss the opportunity to use this crisis. Trevor?
Jake, I think, knows. I totally agree with him. I don't think having a single observation card will save the industry, but I think it would be a great sign to show that we can do something in STEP. And I think STEP are on this, but I would ask STEP actually to, come back with a single stop observation card pretty soon, and I'd imagine every oil company will sign up to it. I don't think it will solve all our economic problems, but I do think it shows that we can do things fast. And as you say, we have done it in the past. We actually built a capping stack in 8 months when we had to. The industry can do things, as you say.
So I think by the end of the year we'll have that proposal, Trevor. Of course, anybody that knows step change material, you will find most of what we need actually already exists in step change material. So you won't be surprised when you see the product. I'd like to get back to questions. Anybody ready to? Great. There's a question down here in the central aisle, as far away from the roving mics as you could possibly get, but that's okay. And the mic's just about to arrive. Right here, just there we go.
Yeah, this year, obviously, with the price of oil going where it's gone, a lot of the operators and the bigger service companies have been pushing the SMEs to get price cuts, not just once, but it's happened a few times. Now, most of this communication will come through the supply chain. The question is, when this is requested by the supply chain, by the operators and the service companies, what safety message filters down through it? Are they just looking for a 10%, 15% cut, whatever the number happens to be? What are they told about safety? Because I haven't seen anyone, it's more about we need a 10, we need a 15% pay cut or price drop. It doesn't actually then underline what we want you to maintain, the safety standards. How will you do that? So it's how that message, is it just a numbers game or what comes behind it to make sure safety is or can be maintained?
Trevor, I think you're going to have to start that one.
Yeah, okay. So I think, this is difficult, right? You saw the graph, and you can see, in any business, if you suddenly went to halving your revenue on your product, you'd have to react. And this, some people didn't react because they thought it would come back. And some people started to react but slowly, and others reacted more quickly. And some, as I've already said, I think some did it in a rather blunt way on the rotor side. On the cost side, I think some people have done it in a blunt way, including us as well. But I think that, nobody can be surprised that one of the levers we've got to pull, as the jargon goes, one of the things that we've got to do is to try and run our business at lower costs. Now, the quickest way to get that is actually for people to lower their prices, but it's not necessarily the best way, and I know that. So there's always a reach for, call the supply chain, and then the tier one, and then the tier two, and all the way down. Eventually, you get to the SMEs, and the message gets translated from the message that I would put out, which is, I want to maintain the safe standards that we always maintain, but yes, I do want to see if we can have this service cheaper, and yes, I do want to see how we can work more efficiently with our suppliers. And I think one of the dangers is that message gets down and gets diluted and simplified into, can you give me 10% off your costs? The message is intended, certainly from us, is intended not to be just that. And actually, there's a big sort of debate in the supply chain at the minute as to whether oil companies actually want efficiency rather than cost, rather than unit cost savings. And I think we're getting to the point where there aren't any more, or there are relatively few in most sectors cost savings per se. And the cost savings come actually through working differently. Now, working differently doesn't mean ditching safety, and I can tell you, in our company, and here in particular, it's the last thing we want to do. We just spent 4 years, and although it was 4 years when we were making money, we spent 4 years increasing the maintenance year on year. And there's an obvious reason for that. All of our assets now are getting much older. They need much more inspection, repair, and maintenance. And actually, it's a bigger part of your budget now. So, you've got to find a way of doing that more efficiently. You don't have the choice of not doing it. you do have a choice about the way you do it. So I would say all companies feel like this, but certainly BP's stance is that, you know, we cannot afford to move away from the kind of safe operations is key, and not just running safely, but, you know, running a safe operation. We are there as a business, as I think, you know, the way Bob put it, safe production. So the message maybe gets diluted, but that isn't the intent, I can tell you that.
So I thought that was a great question. Thanks, Trevor. I'm going to ask Bob if he would like to comment. In that, I wonder if a similar question could be pitched to Bob, in that, in your engagement with either safety representatives or indeed the offshore workforce, is the message with regard to the commitment to safety, to health safety and environmental management, are you sensing that that is getting lost, changing, being reinforced, weakened? What's your sense from your interaction with the workforce, Bob?
From meeting quite a lot, I mean, I've not took numbers, but over the last 7 months, I've met hundreds of safety reps at various events onshore. Reps know what's happening in the industry. They know, they see it, they feel it, they live it. It's generally their jobs and their workmates' jobs that are under threat. And a lot of the focus is, if I'm raising concerns, am I putting my head too far up to get chopped off? And there is definitely a fear among some people that at this time it's maybe just better to go do your trip, doesn't cost too much a fuss, get home, you're back for another trip. But what we're trying to do, and the biggest part of my job is getting them to focus that these problems and these issues definitely need dealt with, but you need to concentrate on the safe operations. You need to ask the questions. You need to be asking the difficult questions. You need to be challenging if the maintenance is getting deferred, it's getting backlogged, or whatever terms. I think forelog's a new word. But if things aren't happening, you should be finding out and engaging that with your workforce, telling your workmates, because knowledge will help alleviate some problems and help fill gaps. But if there's nothing or no information and it's left to rumours that this has been put off, that's been put off, and we don't know why, the best rumour will fill that gap, however true or accurate it is, or inaccurate it is, sorry. So there is a definite feeling offshore, from my experiences, that it's safety, it's definitely still up there with everybody, but the full engagement and challenging safety is maybe as up in its forefront as it has been in the past.
Thanks, Bob. And that is obviously a worrying message insofar as we cannot afford to not have that engagement. I know Trevor wants to come back, but Jake, do you want to say anything at this point? Or no? So I'll just take a couple of comments, Trevor, and then I want to get back to questions. Good.
But I don't know if it surprised people, but I absolutely, Bob, and it worries me if there's any sense of there's less speaking up, and there's less, you know, people are more worried about saying what they see as not good practice, or, you know, something missing on the platform regarding safe operations. You know, I am very, very keen, and I know my staff are as well. They want to hear where things are not being done right. I am concerned about that, and, you know, I'd agree with Jake's point about, you know, if you do see something, you know, I would encourage, you know, safety reps, but everybody. I mean, safety reps are only, I don't know, 5 to 10% of the workforce. Everybody, we would like to hear if you feel there's something awry, you know, and you can go to, you know, if you've got a union rep, you can go to the union, you can go to your supervisor, you can of course come into management, and you can go. There's a hotline, you know, you can use the hotline. And I know some of these are anonymous and some of them are not, and if you prefer to be anonymous, that's okay, as long as you've got a real case and you're not abusing it. But we want to know. My concern about safety at the minute is much less about people taking shortcuts or doing the wrong thing or not doing maintenance, to be honest. My concern is people distraction, which is a real feeling. I've got office people who are very distracted because they can sense that there'll be more layoffs. I've told them there will be more layoffs, and I can understand that that the uncertainty breeds distraction, which in itself can lead to unsafe working. So I'm concerned about that more than anybody taking shortcuts because of costs.
And I think that I would reiterate
we do need to speak up.
I think I would reiterate that. I don't think it's just BP. I think that's wrong. Now, I think we might even have two questions coming from the floor. There's one with the mic down here. Can I take this question from the lady down there first?
Yeah, sorry. Please forgive my lack of knowledge. Is there any evidence of increase in incidents or notices served since the downturn in the price of oil, or is this just something we're preempting? And that maybe kind of leads on from Bob's last answer about maybe people not wanting to raise their heads above the parapet, but is there evidence of it yet, or are we just trying to nip it in the bud before it actually becomes evident?
I can talk to one statistic, which is hydrocarbon releases, which I know that we're concerned about, that there is a potential uptick, but the problem is these indices are lagging. So I don't know of any data set right now, which most of the data sets are lagging, so it's after the fact. When I'm looking at some of the leading indicators, and I absolutely passionately believe that workforce engagement is a leading indicator as to whether there is a brewing problem. My sense is that we have created a little bit of a barrier to engagement. So I hope that this is a preemptive conversation. But on the other hand, I think what Jake, Bob, and Trevor with his engagement with his employees and my own engagement in terms of the decisions we've had to take, I think we have to be absolutely on point to making sure that this doesn't translate into something that we would all wish to never see again in the North Sea. Not a straightforward answer to your very good question, I'm afraid. Thanks. Now there's another question. Oh, the two over here. So.
Yes. We're currently in HSE looking at the RIDDOR figures. That's probably what we've got as the best way of finding out of incidents, personal injuries, etc. have went up. Because I got challenged. It was a safety rep event for Wood Group personnel a couple of weeks ago now, and I was asked, was there any difference with incidents with 3 and 3 and 2 and 3? Now, I thought it would be easy to find out. It's not easy to find out. You've got hundreds of stats. So I'm currently going back 2 years, for 2013, and I'll get the figures at the end of this year for this year. So we will be able to give a definite answer to your question. At the moment, startling difference, but we'll be getting the figures to share with people, so people know exactly what's happening.
Thanks, Bob. More validation of the difficulty of just understanding our own performance. I do want to take some questions from the floor. So, well, I think Paddy, you were up first. With the,
My name's Torek. I'm one of the safe trips in the 40s. Charlie, the conversation that we seem to be having is like Groundhog Day. But we've not been here in previous downturns having the same conversations. So some of the things that was previous downturns, what lessons were learnt, and then what learnings were implemented from them, because we seem to be having the same conversation as all previous downturns. And the other thing was the contradictions then that this presents to the workforce, that we seem to have been here before, have made the same step changes or the same knee-jerk reactions, and now we're back to the workforce again. So is there any learnings that could be pointed to that we've done differently this time?
Can I ask Jake to kick off that one? Because I think also what are we doing differently could be an addition to that question.
Previous downturns. As I said, I've been in the industry since 1980, so I've seen some significant downturns. In fact, there was a casualty in '86 when we got wakened out of sleep to tell us we were going home. That was it. About 7,500 of us down the road overnight. And then a couple of years, of course, Piper blew apart. We've got a different set of regulations now. We've got safety reps now. We've got trade unions now. We've got tripartite working. We've got step change. So I'd like to think that this is preemptive and that we can avoid any significant change or any big event. That's my driver in life, and I would hope it's the driver of everybody here. But saying that, I think we haven't really learned a lot from other downturns. The other big one for me was around 99, 2000. We're down at $9 a barrel. And production was absolutely critical. And we came close, very, very close a few times during that period. It was good luck as opposed to good management that didn't see us have another Piper event. And I would refer to Rough 47-3B, Brent Bravo, and a few others that came very, very close. So you've got to remain vigilant, and I would hope that I've certainly taken lessons from it. I would hope that everybody else takes lessons from them, and that we never ever get into that situation again. As I said, the machinery's here now, you're here now. Let's stop that event happening. On the industrial relations side, there's no a great deal we can do about it at this minute in time, at least, but we'll learn from that one as well.
Thanks, Jake. Bob, do you want to say anything on that one?
Yeah. Well, some of the mistakes that were made in the past, if you go back to the crime era, was that I've touched on, is maintenance. And deferring the maintenance too long doesn't make good sense. As mistakes that have been made in the past, and it should not be allowed to happen again. The HSE are heavily focusing on maintenance, and you'll be hearing more and seeing more about this. There is new inspectors, they're better trained up, etc. on this. So for the people involved offshore, you'll definitely be seeing a much larger HSE focus on maintenance. And for the workforce, for them, there was issues where, I mean, things were getting deferred because the oil price was that high, they didn't want to stop because it was making a lot of money. And now the oil price is too low, so you don't want to stop because you're not making any money. So there has to be a good balance in the middle someplace. And the industry and the workforce need to know this and focus on it.
Thanks, Bob. Trevor, do you want to contribute, or are you?
Yep. Well, I'd like to say something. I think it's a great question because we have had these downturns before, and we have learned, but maybe we haven't learned enough. I think one of the questions I have is whether or not we've had anything like this before. I think this is looking, in our view, and you know, economists are nearly always wrong, but especially oil ones. But in our view, this is going to be here for a while. You know, there is the fundamentals of oversupply mean that, you know, we've now had a year at sub 60 and the last few months at sub 50. We think that will be here for all the way through next year and probably well into 17. So we've never had anything like that before. So I think actually lessons from before may or may not be relevant. What I hope will happen is that we pay more attention to efficiency and changing the way we work than just, you know, cutting costs, cutting unit costs. I hope what we'll do is hang on to, actually, one of the lessons we'll learn is that you don't actually stop all maintenance because that's a very, very short-term intervention and it doesn't help you sustain your business in any sense. You know, you end up with a much worse problem and obviously a much less safe set of installations. I hope we don't drop planning. We've got much better at integrated planning. I hope we use the crisis, if you like, to get even better at planning and even better at working amongst our supply chain and with regulators. I think the real lesson might be how we react to the upturn if and when it comes. You know, this is a cyclical industry, and we sort of kill ourselves a bit by when the price goes up, everyone thinks, well, you know, we're okay now. You know, we can. My boss said to me the other day, when, you know, a period at 45. If you've had a period at 45, 55 seems like a really great oil price, you know, and here we were at 115, and we were worried about costs. We were worried about costs at 115. We're really worried about costs now. But actually, the solution isn't just to cut costs. It's actually to find a completely different way of working, which I know is unpalatable to some people because changing terms and conditions is, an emotional thing. But to be honest, the rotors that were prevalent were not efficient and are not cost, not the right rotor for the time we're in, to be honest.
Most of the guys I speak to, when they talk about business, they say, who plans a business on 400 days in the future? Because literally 12, 14 trips ago, the oil price was 150 and everything was going the way it was. And then the oil price fell off a cliff. But we're now being shown a graph of it falling off a cliff. But obviously, these graphs mean nothing because if it didn't forecast the drop off the cliff, then what information can you actually take from it to inform the future? Maybe showing graphs of where the oil price was at the future forecasts actually causes more confusion. You just plan a course and go that course over 5 years or 8 years or whatever it is, as opposed to, oh, it's really good, our forecast didn't forecast this, change the forecast. Because the guys on the work with, the guys you're engaging with, they see that as a contradiction. Because the information you're now using to validate changes wasn't there previous, because the forecast didn't forecast it.
Patrick, I think you're highlighting the frustration that I think every manager or leader in this industry has suffered throughout my working life. I have failed. I'm going to say Trevor has failed. I'm going to say everybody has failed to predict that. And the person who's got that silver bullet or that golden bullet to actually help us predict it would be, well, so we have to deal with the scenario that we are in today. And I think Trevor has said, we are not assuming that there's going to be an upturn in the price. And therefore, we have to take some of these difficult decisions. That's the situation we face ourselves in today. And I don't think I have heard anybody talk actually about what we think the future price is going to be other than it isn't going to go up. And Trevor very rightly has challenged us to make sure that we don't make the mistakes of the past if or when that upturn in price comes. I'm going to turn to another question because I know somebody's been sitting there for a while now.
Well, I think to be honest, that most of the question I was wanting to ask has been exhausted. We're all going in the same direction. What I'd like to get back to is the three speakers that were up on the table to start with, which is where we were. And I'm a safety rep, a maintenance technician, and I've been around for quite a while, as you can probably tell by my face. But there's the efficiency charter that Trevor talked about. If we can mention that first of all, it's where you should be looking. I think you're looking, people like yourself and Ian, with the greatest respect, people like you are looking for the efficiency changes, but the wrong people are looking. Well, I'll explain that as much as you want, or as little as you want. That slide that you put up about the warehouse, you could take me last year, give me a quick kick in, change my rota. I'm not looking for any sympathy, but that's the wrong way to go. You've got millions getting lost in that supply chain. Take the boy's point, I'm not getting anybody in particular, but it's much different figures for the ones that affected me. You could half my salary and make no difference to your business, but you could make a tremendous difference by getting a grip of the millions that are lying about in cubby holes in Aberdeen that we keep reordering every 3 weeks, by the way. And the second point, and again, I'm trying not to be personal, from what Bob was saying about the HSE and what the good things that we're trying to do and introduce with safety reps, and I don't see much of it, mate. I've been around for a while. I see very little, except when I take 3 HSE inspectors coming out to my installation. As a good safety rep, I take them to task and I get to speak to them. I don't need to worry about putting my head above the parapet or not. That's when I take the opportunity. And I'm saying this so that people will realise the difficulty you have as a safety rep. And the third point that Jake was saying is that really it's down to the guy who, big broad umbrella, is a good safety rep, playing his part and playing the role on the field that we're getting. You know, some people support you, some people don't. And we should be clear about what it is we're trying to say, because it's all very well up on the desk, on the stage, saying all the good things that we'd like to hear. But that's a bit of reality for what we're actually dealing with on a daily basis.
that was a major blunder at the beginning of this year, in my opinion, because you've lost quite a lot of the people that you had that should be driving. Because if we haven't got a business, and if there isn't a circle, we wouldn't be here. But you lost quite a lot of people, good people at the start of the year, by making severe changes in a matter of weeks, without real consultation.
So I'd like to, because you were looking very directly at Trevor, perhaps rightly, he's on the panel. Exactly, but Trevor is also representative of oil and gas, and I think Trevor has already acknowledged that there's been some of the good, the bad, and the ugly in that whole issue. Real point, I mean, not the only, the point I would like to come back on is the engagement, the absolute importance of engagement. But to answer your question in terms of the balance between terms and conditions and efficiency, perhaps, Trevor, you could just expand a little bit on John's work in the totality of the efficiency piece there, because I don't know if people understand just the magnitude of the challenge that you laid to the industries, at the industry's door.
I can, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with the gentleman's point about warehousing and materials and the waste in there, which is why I gave the example and why we turned our attention to it. I mean, to be honest, I think I said when I was speaking, you could ask yourself, why weren't we doing this already? Which is exactly what I asked my people, which wasn't very motivating, but it's, there is a lot of waste that we also have to go for. Now, there aren't loads of easy things you can do to get costs down. But I agree with your point about warehousing. I think on, if I can say just a thing on rotors, because in VP, I actually think we tried to do it a different way to some of my colleagues, and I'll just say a word for them. We tried to consult and we tried to compromise, and we've ended up with a rotor which actually looks like a compromise, but it's a rotor that our staff are going to go on and going to accept, and it is a change, but it's not as significant a change as some other companies, and it's certainly done with more warning. What John has been doing, and what Oil and Gas UK are leading, the Efficiency Task Force, they're trying to get a push behind more cross-industry work. So as I say, every company's doing their own thing. There's also this push to try and do things and simplify it across. So one thing he's trying to do is to help standardize equipment. I mentioned this, they're starting off with, I think, with compressors, valves, and subsea trees as something that we all kind of reinvent constantly, and there's no need, particularly in this kind of late stage in the basin. So that's one thing they're trying to do. The second thing is they're trying to promote this culture of more engagement and more consistency amongst the supply chain and better conversations between the supply chain and the operators and the SMEs, and try and open up that conversation. Part of that is about access. We apparently, sort of surprised to me, but we're apparently quite difficult to get to. So we're trying to kind of open the doors up and listen more. And the third thing he's trying to do is to match problems with solutions. So, one of the supply chain complaints that we hear a lot is, you're not listening to my good idea. And the complaint on the other side is, well, you're not listening to my, my problem. So what we're trying to do is to get operators and sort of tier one suppliers to say, this is the major issue I've got, whether it's a painting issue or a pressure containment issue or a certain type of drilling issue or a certain processing issue. This is the problem. Can you help fix this problem? And rather than people coming to you with, here's my latest tool or my latest chemical. So those are the three pillars of what John's trying to do. And I think he's got, actually significant cross-engagement that we haven't done before. And in answer to the gentleman's question about, how do you keep it going? Well, or how do you learn from last time? One of the things here is to keep it going and not just kind of give up with all these initiatives when things maybe get a little bit better. Having said that, I don't think they're going to get better. And on the point of oil price, actually, we weren't planning on 100. Most companies were probably planning on 75 or 80. And we've been really surprised by it being at 50. You have to plan on something, and I agree with you. The forecasting can confuse, but you have to, in business, you have to plan on a price. You have to, you're sensitive to it as well.
Same, exactly the same position we took in our company. Jake, I'll come back to you, Bob. So just hold.
Just to put the point that was made there into context from a workforce representative perspective, I deal with the divers, who are all dairy workers. It's a dairy agreement. They're all virtually every single one of them are self-employed, and also deal with the supply vessel crews, and they're scratching their heads on how we're being more efficient to save money by cutting their wages by 15, 20%, 25%, because none of them are working. They're all sitting in the house, and they cannot get their heads around the idea that cutting their rates is in any way going to reduce costs, because there's no work. They're all laid up, every vessel's laid up. And it was brought home during a discussion about this cut, when one diver said they were tied up along the quayside, and there was a couple of guys on the deck flogging a chicksand, and the hammer broke, and there was a ship's charters on the quayside, and he went over and there was a hammer there for 12 quid. So he phoned the office and said, "Can I go and purchase a hammer?" And he said, "No, you've got to go through the procurement department, the supply department, the delivery department," and they got the hammer 4 days later at 200 odd quid. And they couldn't have worked out how that was being more efficient. And it's getting through that quagmire. And again, the greatest respect to Trevor, because I think BP are probably doing a reasonable job, but getting through that quagmire of efficiency to get the message down to the guys is the difficulty that you face right now, because they're just not seeing it. The only thing they're seeing is cuts, and that's how you balance that is a difficult job.
And that's why I think it's so important that we do hear from the sort of work that John Pierce and Trevor are leading, so that you understand the context. So there's a webinar question coming in, but Bob wants to just, so if I can just take Bob, and I'll go to...
Just a quick answer to your point. I mean, the work I'm doing and what we're putting in place, we the HSE, you should have more direct contact. It shouldn't just be a 7 o'clock meeting, and that's the first time you see the agenda. That's the first time you might know they're coming on board a couple of days before when everybody's running around with black bags. So there should be preempting these visits. You should be getting the agendas at the start of the year, a couple of months before the inspectors are coming on. The HSE are basically there when they speak to reps. That's intelligence gathering. They want to see what's the concerns. So if they're going to be an intelligence gathering regulator, part of that is open avenues to do that. And by putting in place, getting the agendas sent out to like shared email addresses, you're covering all the safety reps. You're not covering the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many is there when the inspectors come out. So they need to be, that is something we will be getting in place, and that's just to improve the communication and engagement with all the workforce. But we need the reps to then put that in agendas out to the workforce to get their knowledge, their experience and feedback. And it's just for improving stuff and preventing stuff. That's what it's all about.
Bob, thank you. Well, I guess this is a webinar question coming in, is it?
Yeah, this is a question from the 40s field from Dave, who's a safety rep out on the 40s. Question to the panel, to be answered individually. What are the top 3 actions that you would take to improve workforce engagement?
Great question, and well, I'm going to give the guys a chance to think, but just listen to what's happened here. We've now had a question directly from offshore. That's what the webinar facilities can do to us, and if we can get more of that direct engagement, and I thank the safety reps and 40s for that, because it's a great example of really trying to get the engagement. Now you've had a chance to think. So I'll ask Bob, actually, so rather than go straight to Trevor, who's always been first off. I'll go to Bob.
Thanks for that. The top 3, I would say for improving engagement, for the HSE side would be to communicate better with the workforce, because they shouldn't be just telling the industry, oh, you've got to engage your workforce, it's better for your safety. There is a role for the HSE to improve their engagement, and that is with the safety reps, the duty holders, and also the contractors. Because like I say, the contractors are by far the biggest amount of people who work offshore. So improving engagement with that. For safety reps, if they do the functions, and if they're not getting the time training facilities to do their functions, then come to the HSE and we'll improve in that. And for the wider community, it's get involved and get engaged with step change. There's lots of very good things, step change toolkits, or the asset integrity stuff coming out, or the work groups. That is an excellent way getting information and knowledge to share with each other and use with the wider workforce. I think that was 3.
Thank you, Bob. Great plug for step change. Jake?
Dead easy ones.
Bob, could you switch
Which
off your
won't
mic?
sit well, but here we go. I'd standardise rotas. I'd have everybody on 2 on, 2 off, and I'd have everybody working 154 days. Because that would bring about unity, equality, trust, respect across the board, and everybody would be working the same rota, which would maximise your ability to use seat capacity and everything else, especially around hubs. There's great efficiencies to be made there, rather than having this inequality of some working 3, some working 2, some working 2, 3, some working 3, 4, 3, 5, and so on. I would standardise some very simple safety systems that we refer to, stop or observation systems, risk assessment, and golden rules, because too many people have got different rules, as I alluded to. And on 3, I would do this every month during the period that we've got, and I would broaden out that webinar system and have safety committees logging in here for every session that we do, and do this town hall type approach on a more regular basis.
Thank you, Jake. Very thought-provoking. Trevor?
I have 3. I'd love to know if the workforce would all get behind a 2 on 2 rota everywhere. That would be an interesting thing to know. The 3 I would have, one is, we talked about it already, the speak up culture. I would really encourage not just safety reps, but everybody to be brave enough, if that's what it takes, to raise something if you see something you don't like. I can't say it enough times or emphasize it enough. It's easy to kind of slip into an us versus them thing, but what I really want and what I think oil companies and this basin really needs is a safe industry. So if you see something that's not, you should shout. And maybe you'll be told it's okay. Maybe it will be explained to you. Maybe it won't be okay, and you can obviously go again if you feel like you need to go anonymously. But speak up is my number 1 thing. Number 2 is I don't know whether this is easy to do at the minute because of the uncertainty in the industry. But I would say we need to find a way of getting more ownership and more pride back into our kind of installations and into our business. I mean, we've got some fantastic installations, fantastic offshore business. Not everyone, I think, goes out feeling, great ownership or pride in what they do. You see some platforms with that branded pride, and you see others without it, and rigs. And I think that would be the second one: is try and, own your site and feel proud about it. And then the third one is this thing about waste and efficiency. Is everybody, I believe, can see something that's inefficient. So tell the people you work for that you see something inefficient, and actually suggest a way of it being more efficient, or less wasteful, or less expensive. It doesn't actually have to be a cost thing. Here's something I suggest that will make it better. I think those 3 things would be mine.
So now I'm getting ways. Jameson.
Just one comment, Ian. This has come in from a safety rep on the Brents, Pat, and he said the same question in reference to supply chain. The same questions are being raised here at the moment about procurement of equipment. For example, the presented example of the price of a hammer when compared with the loss of qualified personnel. So I think the point that he's trying to make there is just, are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Yeah. We're spending too much, robbing Peter to pay Paul there.
So a good comment from offshore. Again, I welcome the comment from offshore. We have time for one more comment. I think somebody has got, we've got at least one here. So.
We spoke about no compromise to safety, worried about distractions, people taking shortcuts, the efficiency charter contributing to performance improvement, where the HSE has stated that safety has to be at the heart of efficiency. Do you not think that contradicts a 3 and 3 rota? It actually compromises health for longer shift patterns, which can contribute to heart disease, work-life balance, which affects your welfare, divorce rates, stress-related illnesses, and potential increase in incidents offshore. And a step change a few years ago, I'm sure it was stated in a Taoiseach news by Jake several months ago, that they actually promoted like a 2 and 4 or a 2 and 3 cycle, because it was all those things there. It contributed to a greater efficiency offshore, better well-being offshore. So what's changed then that it was good then but not now?
With regard to that, I'm not sure. I don't recall step change ever having made a statement vis-a-vis the best rota. I do know that we have looked, that there is guidance around how operators, we should look to operators, duty holders, or employers to make sure that first of all, there is the transition itself, the change to a different rota, and then there is the establishment and maintenance of that rota, and that they assess the impact of that change.
They seem to manage it in Norway on a 2 and 4 rota, where the salaries are higher, and they don't mess with people's work-life balances. They've got family values.
So, I mean, Norway is a very different environment or regime to us in terms of where they are as a basin. I worked abroad for a number of years, and the rota there was 4 and 4. So, you know, I don't know that rota is a single rota can be singled out as better or worse. I think it's everything that goes round about the rota. It is the transition to a different rota. It is the engagement of the workforce around rotas. It is the recognition of the impact that can have, and at the end of the day, how we deal with people.
It's also working the rota.
It's working, absolutely, absolutely. So it is the totality of the management, I think, rather than any one single rota. And I think we've already heard in this room today the acknowledgement that the transition in terms of a change from one rota to another, that there are lessons to be learned from that. And I do believe that people are doing it better now in terms of engaging with workforce as they contemplate rota changes. Once we're actually into that rota, of course, we need to actually observe and be aware of the impact that rota is having on individuals and their families, the wider family, which I would expect any good employer to do.
It's also the health and safety. You're not expecting higher incident rates?
Well, this is the question that was raised before. And I mean, are we seeing a change? Now, I know of one operator who has seen a change to illness, and we all can speculate about that. Illness as a result of a rota change, which actually, interestingly enough, isn't a 3 and 3, it's straight 3 and 3. So, you know, we have to have a little bit of time, I think, to assess the impact, because there are some sites where there has been a change, and all I can say is that I haven't heard an issue in my step change role. So I'm not sure there's going to be an answer to that particular question. Sorry, I thought it was, but I do recognise. You know, this is the issue that was raised in terms of the engagement, the risk to the industry that we have failed in our continued strive to engage with the workforce, and that's where I think everybody in this room has a key role to play. I want to come back to that in my closing remarks, but if you don't mind, I know there was one more question. Can I just take the very last this last question, which is right up in the corner, and thank you for your observations.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you. One thing which I don't think you've really sort of addressed is the people offshore, whether you like it or not, feel like they've been sort of personally sort of taken into this with the 3 and 3 rota. You're asking for them for buy-in now, and most of the guys feel they've had a real kicking offshore, and you want them to engage in it. Morale, I'm very, very new to the offshore industry. Morale, I believe, is an all. You've got less time at home. You're wanting people to do more training with it during the less time at home, whether it's for safety rep or whatever the courses are. I just think the companies need to have a look and say, well, yeah, and I know we all like moaning with morale and all the rest of them, all like a moan, but I think it seems to be quite a serious issue. And then at the same time, you still want engagement from the workforce. I mean, I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, and the guys would respond to that.
Maybe the question is, so having gone through that in closing remarks from each of the panelists, what lesson have you individually taken away in terms of going forward? Because sadly, I think we have to acknowledge that we're not at the end of the challenge that the industry faces, and therefore, what is it we have learned this summer or this year that we're going to apply, make sure that it is applied next year. Bob, would you like to start that one?
Yeah, well, some of the lessons, and I'll touch on your points with 3 and 3. The HSE cannot come in and say 3 and 3 is unsafe, because people have worked 3 and 3 in various parts of the industry offshore for a lot of years. But what they will do is inspect the management of change and make sure it's risk assessed. The people who are doing the risk assessment are suitably qualified and know what they're looking for. And there's also the responsibility on the individual. The individuals have got responsibilities in the Health and Safety at Work Act to make sure they're safe to carry out the task. Now, if you're not feeling up to it, you should highlight that. And that includes when you're going home. They'll treat fatigue or being knackered, for want of better words, going home, driving home, just as badly as they'll treat drink driving. If you're knowingly going and driving a car when you're unfit through tiredness, the police will come down on you. So know your limitations and highlight your limitations. And if you feel things aren't happening right at your workforce, challenge it. That's what safety and being a safety rep is all about, is challenging what's there. Lessons learned from the past. I dug out the first Taoiseach News, which is August 2004, and there's 4 headlines in that, and it was only like a wee bit A4, it used to come in a wee 3-fold thing. And the headlines on that were changes to the safety case, hand and lifting injuries, working time regulations, and the 4th thing was maintenance. Is your place falling apart? So are we learning the lessons from the past? I mean, that's what, 11 years ago. And the other thing I'd like to close on and saying that the HSE are trying to improve what they've been doing. They're trying to improve engagement, and part of that and going around and speaking to duty holders, contractors, etc., is seeing what engagement they're doing with the workforce. And this has all come out with a best practice, what's working well, to share with the industry, because we all have to be in this together. And when it comes to workforce engagement and safety, they do go hand in hand. And with that, the safer you are, the more efficient you'll be at, and the better it'll be for everybody's livelihoods within the industry.
Well, thanks, Jake.
3 and 3's here, and we're going to hit a deal with it. But there's different ways of dealing with it, as I've alluded to. Health and safety are critical, and there's ways in which you can report it, there's ways in which you can seek advice, and believe me, the advice or the information that I get will be shared widely in this debate. In fact, I'll be on a train tonight and I'm heading down to Edinburgh to talk to the Energy Select Committee, giving oral evidence tomorrow morning at the Scottish Parliament. So your views, my constituency's views, are being shared with everybody in an attempt to influence and coerce change and improvement. That's not to say that we want to work with industry as well. We will work with industry, but I think industry needs to listen. I hear that we haven't learned, or there's lessons to be learned from what we've done. I think there's lessons, far greater lessons, to be learned about how you engage the workforce before you implement change. But that's probably a debate for another day. So, no, I would just say there's machinery there. As I've said, machinery's there, use it. And myself, Willie, and others, Bob, will endeavour to drive your agenda for continued change and improvement to your health and safety.
Thank you, Jake. Trevor?
So again, totally agree with Jake. Industry does need to listen. I think you'd be surprised how much commonality there is between us actually and what we think is good for the industry. On the rota's point, I'm not trying to defend 3.3, although I actually don't think it's an unsafe rota. I'm not actually about to implement 3.3. I'm not about to implement 3.3. I've consulted with my workforce. We're going to do 3.4, 3.5. It's actually a little complicated, but that's what the workforce wanted, and that's what we've agreed as a compromise. We're not going to change from 2.3 to 3.3. I personally think it would be better if everybody did the same rota, whether it's 2.2 or 3.3. By the way, we work 4.4 in many installations around the world, and we don't find it an unsafe rota. So I think it's not unsafe. It is unpopular. I get that. I think the important part is how we implement it, as Bob said. My biggest role, my biggest task now for the time I'm still here is to try and find the balance between, there's this morale point the gentleman raised, is how do you find the balance between convincing everybody in the workforce, offshore, onshore, management, yeah, management as well, that there's a really big issue here to deal with. Companies are going out of business. Thousands of people are losing their jobs. In Norway, by the way, it's more than twice as many as here, and not least because their rota is crazy in this environment. You know, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. It is really serious, and I think it's going to be here and a longer slump, if you like, than we've seen before, which is why part of my job is to make sure we're making the right interventions. And I clearly, you know, clearly some of them are maybe ham-fisted, have not been thought through enough. I'm now speaking for the whole industry, but I'm sure in BP as well. But I can tell you, we spend hours trying to think about how to fix this and how we will survive. And I can tell you, BP, you know, we intend to survive through this crisis. I think the industry in the North Sea can survive as well. We can survive at $50. The oil and gas is there. The competencies are there. Will there be as many jobs? I don't think so.
Thank you, Trevor. And I'm glad that I'm going to draw this session to conclusion. My suspicion is that the session will not finish because we're going to go for teas and coffees, and I'm sure there are going to be further questions and the odd jabbing in the chest, perhaps. But before I make my closing remarks, I said that I would like to, on behalf of everybody in the auditorium and those on the webinar, express my gratitude to those on the panel. Those of you that have been in a panel know what I'm talking about here. When you're sitting in a panel like this and you're getting questions, observations, it really makes you think. It really, and you'd be surprised at the influence the questions, the points that are being made have on the thinking. So not only has the panel contributed a lot, for which I hope the auditorium can join me in thanking them on behalf of those in the webinar, but also in the auditorium. So my grateful thanks to the panel. Trust me when I say that you have given every one of us, whether it's facilitator or the three on the panel, you've given us things to think about. I thought in closing remarks, I wanted to actually go back to Patrick's question, which is, what's different? What have we learned? And I'm glad that Trevor finished on a slightly upbeat note. I mean, we will survive this. But in effect today, we have presented, rather, we haven't presented today, there is a very, very compelling case for change that we are all now probably more familiar with just simply because of our exposure to the industry. And that compelling case for change is going to cause those periods of discomfort that we've all alluded to this morning. But what's changed? Well, actually, I think, I'm going to say, I'm going to reflect personally, I don't think pre-Piper that we could have ever envisaged that there would be an auditorium filled with people and a webinar, okay, that's technology, but people in the auditorium who have direct access to the regulator, to a representative of the workforce through the trade union, or indeed a managing director of certainly one of the largest, if not the largest, operator in the North Sea. And you have been able to make your feelings known directly to them. This whole session is about engagement, and I just don't think this would have happened in the past. So if we only say that is different and that's new or that's a change, that at least is something. The summary that I wanted to make kind of draws what I think we've been hearing all this morning and actually puts it in the context of what Step Change is doing and the Step Change leadership team. So what came out of our planning day? What has the debates been there? And I think if I summarize what we are doing, there's kind of 3 or 4 buckets. Actually, I hope that they strike a chord with you. and which will therefore encourage you to either participate in the work groups or at least do what every panelist and I have asked, which is to encourage your engagement. So the key, the first bucket that we're working hard on in step change is the simplification and standardization agenda, and actually doing a few things well. In other words, prioritizing, get rid of some of the stuff that we have to deal with, whether it's the procurement department stopping us buying a 12-pound hammer, whatever it is, getting rid of that bureaucracy. But equally important is staying the course. And that goes to Trevor's point. Who knows what the oil price is going to be in 12 months' time? Maybe there's going to be an uptick, maybe not. But what we are very bad at, and I think something we've learned, is that we never finish what we start. And I would say that of my company, and I would say that broadly of the industry. We find ourselves moving on to the next panic. At the same time, we also feel that there is a need, and it actually goes to the question that was asked earlier about, is there a statistic telling us that it's getting worse? We need to constantly create a sense of unease, chronic unease, so that we are always challenging. We should never, ever find ourselves being complacent. So if some of the conversation this morning has fostered that chronic unease to make us challenge, then we think, in step change, think that's a good thing. And the last one, the main bucket, is workforce engagement, which is why we have this session this morning, which is a workforce engagement session. And after this session, after the tea and coffees, I hope that you will be able to take something away in terms of how workforce engagement is working through step change, i.e. through the work groups. And there will be more discussion on the role and some of the changes in our thinking with regard to how we can help elected safety representatives. Can I thank everybody for the questions here or indeed in the webinar? I suggest we break now, head next door for teas and coffees. Thank you very much.